You can have them all for $46.
Trouble is, they're not different enough.
This is the guy with the mind control. The fellow who's been writing those ransom notes is the one that's been making all these robberies and accidents happen.
A wreck is a wreck is a wreck. That's all you show here. This story needs something different.
It's only $46.
Well, if you could get me a picture of the Spider-Man, that I'd buy.
Who?
Spider-Man. At least that's what these drunks called him. They saw someone climbing up and down the walls. Must be something in the water. Everyone's going crazy. Doctor, a lawyer, now a judge turning crook. This sneak thief and all of his buddies saying they saw a man climbing walls like a spider. I think I'll retire. Robbie, come in here with the galleys, please. And you want to work here? You must be crazy, too. Spider-Man.
But he's real. There is someone like that. He can climb walls, and he is like a spider. I mean it.
There is a Spider-Man?
Yes, sir.
You're sure?
Very sure.
I suppose you're going to tell me he caught you with his little web.
No, sir, but I did see him.
You hear that, Robbie? Mr. Parker here saw a Spider-Man. Isn't that wonderful? Are you on drugs?
I did see him.
What do you look like?
Well, like a spider.
How many legs do you have?
Well, 2, of course. He's a man.
You just said he was a spider. Spiders have got lots of legs.
No, sir. He's like a spider. He can do the things a spider does. Climb walls and spin webs. And he's very, very strong.
I can step on a spider. Can I step on him?
No, sir. I told you he's not a spider. He's a full-grown man. He's got the strength of a spider, but it's all in proportion to his size. Spiders are very, very strong, so he's thousands of times stronger than you or me.
You hear all this, Robbie? I mean, do you believe what's going on here? What we thought was a smart kid who had tried to be nice to? Parker, get out of here. All right, Robbie, what have you got?
But you've got to believe me, please. I did see him, and I can prove it.
Well, how, Peter?
I took a picture of him.
A picture? You have an actual picture?
Yes, sir.
But why didn't you say so?
Well, what does he look like?
He's...
Well, what?
What does he wear?
What do you mean, what does he wear?
Well, you said he climbs up the size walls, right? Well, then my guess is he's wearing sneakers.
No, nothing like that. No, he wears a special costume.
A costume?
Sure. Well, why not? Would you like to go around with people pointing at you all the time? Hey, there goes that Spider-Man, the freak who climbs walls. I mean, why shouldn't he have the same privacy as you or me?
All right. He wears a costume. Now go home and get the picture.
Okay, Peter? Get the picture.
Sure. Why not?
Okay, Robbie, let's go.
I thought we'd start with a 2-column lead on this.
Welcome to Superhero Cinephiles Podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine. And today, to talk about the 1977 Spider-Man movie is Justin Zyduck. Justin, how you doing today?
Pretty good.
Great.
To be here.
Glad to have you on. I was really excited to get your email because I recently discovered your podcast, The Iron Age of Comics, and been listening to that in bits and pieces here and there. I kind of jump around a little bit to the books I'm most interested in looking at, and you and your co-host Jim, you've got some really interesting takes on stuff from the late 80s and the 90s eras of comics, and so I've been having a lot of fun listening to it. But before I keep talking too much about it, why don't you tell people a little bit about it and yourself?
So I'm Justin. I'm half of the podcast. We build this podcast, The Iron Age of Comics, as a critical reevaluation of comic books from 1985 to 2000. The whole idea is that we always say there's the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and then there's the Modern Age. And the Modern Age has been the Modern Age for 40 years now, and that doesn't seem right. So we're trying to make a case that this little 15-year period has its own characteristics and flavor to it in the same way that the Golden Age or the Silver Age or Bronze Age do. It's also kind of a reclamation project because a lot of times people talk about 90s comics, right? And they're like, oh, 90s comics. I don't know. And like there's certainly no shortage of comics that may make you go, yeah, 90s, but there is actually quite a lot that's really worth checking out, I think, and putting some thought into. And I'm very appreciative to hear that you're enjoying it.
Yes, yeah. I was actually, I for some reason I got this bug in my ear. It was because I was actually going through Alan Moore's Supreme run, and I got this bug in my head about, I wonder if anyone has done like a podcast about like 90s comics. And I was thinking specifically like the early 90s, like Image style things. So when I was looking it up, that's how I found your show, which wasn't exactly what I expected, but it was a pleasant surprise to get interested in it. And I'm also with you guys too. It really annoys me that the modern age has been going on for like 40 years now. And I've seen different people try and define it in different ways. I've seen I think League of Comic Geeks, that website, I think they called it the Platinum Age or something like that. There's another, I think it was Comic Geek Speak or something like that. When they were doing like covering like all the X-Men comics, I think they called it the Chromium Age, which also really fit for the time. But yeah, the Iron Age I think is a really good name, so I really kind of like gravitated towards how you guys defined it, and it's it's especially meaningful for me because that's the period when I came into comics myself. So I came in like the mid-late 90s because of all the cartoons that were on the air as a kid, and so the Iron Age is really kind of like my age of comics. That's that and the beginning of the, I get post Iron Age or whatever from the millennium on.
Right. That's somebody else's job to come up with a name for that one. So yeah, we recuse ourselves from that.
But how did you guys decide to do this podcast? Like what kind of brought it about?
Well, I used to do a different podcast called Indefensible Inc. With a guy named Ryan McClure, and he had to step down just for time reasons, life, right? And that was a podcast about like it was sort of meant to be like the how did this get made for comics, the bad comics, right, that we talked about. And when I had the chance to sort of restart, Jim is somebody who I knew from online. And he was like, yeah, listen to the show. We know each other. If I have a microphone, or I can get a microphone if you would be up for teaming up. And yeah, that's sort of how it is. We picked this age in particular just because, for one thing, we thought that people would be interested in it, right? I mean, it's got stuff like Watchmen, it's got stuff like Dark Knight Returns, it's got stuff like, all the early post-crisis, really chewy stuff. We thought there would be an audience for that, right? But also, this is, a time when we were both really active in the comic scene. And so we thought we would have more firsthand experience and insights into this sort of thing, rather than I personally actually prefer Bronze Age comics. That's sort of my golden age, my personal golden age. But, I wasn't necessarily there for all that stuff. So I don't have the firsthand, here's what the word on the street was, when this was coming out. Whereas with the Iron Age, I was reading Wizard, a lot of that time. And I was plugged into the early internet. So.
Yeah, and also it's a good time to talk about that age of comics because many of the people like me who were coming into the comics at that time, now we're of an age to look back on it and kind of reflect on it a little more. Whereas back in when I was in comics, everyone was talking about the Bronze Age or the Silver Age, not so much the Golden Age, but definitely Bronze Age and Silver Age were hot topics of conversation around message boards. And I remember that's actually how I started getting into Bronze Age stuff, was because of people always talking about Claremont's X-Men and things of that nature. And so yeah, it's really a good show. And you guys have some very interesting takes, and you've also covered some interesting stuff on there that I probably wouldn't have expected to be covered. You guys, most recently I listened to the Squadron Supreme episode, and you guys had a lot of really interesting things to say about that and drawing comparisons between that and Watchmen. So it's more than just a review show. You guys have really well thought out and intelligent takes, and even when I don't agree with your takes, I'm just kind of well, I can see where they're coming from. They've done a really good job of laying this all out.
Well, thank you. No, that's very gratifying to hear. That's sort of what we are looking to do, is sort of think through a lot of this stuff that often sort of gets dismissed or pushed aside or whatever.
Very cool. So why don't you tell people about your own superhero origin story? How did you get into superheroes, comic books, all this kind of stuff?
Ooh, I don't have a story of like my first comic book because I don't have any memories from before there were comic books in the house. I guess my parents just got some. There are some from even like before I was born. So I don't know where they came from. I don't know what their provenance is, but there were just always comic books in the house. So I read those. I think that's the galvanizing moment, like the moment where it sort of like clicked in my brain, was the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie, where I saw that at a pretty impressionable age, old enough to see it, but young enough to really be like, I've never seen anything like this before. It really, the moment where he pulls in the mugger and says, "I'm Batman," I think that that rewired my brain in some way to respond to these things in such a way that's like, if I hadn't seen that, it might have been comic books would be something that I enjoyed as a kid and then grow out of when I, move on to whatever. Because of that movie, I think it was like, oh no, actually, you're going to care about this stuff for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I had a similar thing too not with comic books. I do remember my first comic books, but with superheroes, I definitely don't have a memory of a time before I was introduced to Superman or Batman. And I also saw, like, I was born in '83, so I saw Batman '89 on VHS. We had it on VHS, and I think my parents didn't really do a good job of screening movies, which I actually am grateful for. A lot of like young millennials, Gen Xers, our parents didn't really care too much about screening for things, which I maintain was actually a beneficial thing. But I think what happened was, so I had to have been about like 5 or 6 when that came out on VHS. And I think what happened was probably my mom, who was, she would have been like maybe 10, 11, 12 when Batman 66 was on TV. So I think she saw Batman at the video store. She's like, "Oh, Batman. That's okay for a little kid." Not really realizing what it was. I don't even think to this day she's ever actually seen it at all, like a single frame of that movie. So I don't think she has any context for it.
Cool.
So one thing we also like to talk about with guests here is, what kind of stuff are you interested in lately? Anything that's grabbing your attention? Not necessarily for the podcast, but just for fun.
Yeah, sure. Actually, like, doing the podcast takes up a lot of my like comic reading time specifically, but I've been reading the P.G. Woodhouse Jeeves stories, the Jeeves and Wooster lately. Been doing a Buffy rewatch with my wife. We're up to the end of season 5, and we're going to see. She doesn't really get into like the post season 5 era, so we're going to see how far we can push that. But yeah, I'm really not in touch with like any of the stuff that's going on in the world today. Unfortunately, the most recent thing that I discovered, and this was apparently 2 years old or something, that sort of flew under the radar, but Batman: The Audio Adventures, which is
I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's like I guess HBO Max put it together, whatever they're called now or whatever they were called then, put it together. And it's written by somebody who used to write for Saturday Night Live. So that's another one of my obsessions tied into that. But it's sort of funny, but it's not entirely a joke. And it's actually, there are some really clever, like, old school kind of Batman plots in it. Like if you almost sort of think of it as like Batman 66, but it's like the Steve Englehart Batman that it's pulling from instead of the Batman of the time. So I really enjoy it. I recommend it to anybody. I just found out about it the other week because of, sort of like, hey, here's a thing that came out a couple of years ago and nobody publicized it, but it's actually great. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I briefly had an HBO Max subscription, and I canceled it when they changed it to Max, and they upped it and they filled it up with all the Discovery stuff. But I do remember seeing that on there, and I remember thinking, like, that's something I should probably check out at some point, but I never actually got around to it. For my part, just like you, I also have trouble consuming stuff for fun, because in addition to these podcasts, I also do I teach classes in film too, so almost all my time, like reading or watching time, is consumed lately either preparing stuff for the podcast or preparing stuff for my own classes. So it can be tough to find stuff. But I did recently read up to almost completely caught up with the Absolute Superman title by Jason Aaron, which is I'm not sure if you've. It's good. It's really cool. It's a very interesting, very different take on Superman. Whoop, my son just knocked over some toys. Sorry for anybody who got a loud bang in their eardrums there. But yeah, it's been really cool. It's this, he reimagines everything about it, just like Scott Snyder did the same thing with Batman 2, and a bunch of other creators doing it with these other characters. I haven't checked in too much of the other stuff. I read one of the Wonder Woman ones and it was pretty good, and I read most of the Batman stuff, which I really liked, but the Superman stuff has definitely been my favorite of the bunch so far. He's gotten some really interesting like sci-fi ideas in there. He's also bringing back the whole idea of like from the Golden Age, the Superman, protector of the oppressed and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really kind of refreshing, interesting, unique take on Superman. One that I don't think I would have ever imagined something like this for the character. So it's really cool.
Yeah, that's something I'm probably going to check out once that's collected. I can't get myself into a comic book shop every month anymore, but I do like to catch up occasionally with some of the trades, and I have a good library system where I live. So support your local library, kids, as we always say on the Iron Age of Comics.
Yeah, I'm. That's one of the things I live in Japan, but I'm going to visit my my family this summer, and one of the things I'm going to try and do is to use my mom's library card to get set up with a online library subscription, because I can't do it from here. So, and the library systems here, they don't have anything in English really. But anyway, like I said, today we are talking about Spider-Man, but not the Tobey Maguire one. We did an episode on that already. Instead, this is the 1977 made-for-TV Spider-Man film, which was also a backdoor pilot for a very short-lived TV series. And the TV show had a very strange thing, because this was on CBS. CBS was doing Incredible Hulk at the time. They were also doing Wonder Woman. And I think they were also doing the Captain America TV films. And so they were getting kind of nervous that they were going to be pigeonholed as like the superhero network, which ironically is what the CW would later become years later. And so when they did this film and this series, they decided to, because the film did very well, it got very good ratings, and so they decided they couldn't not turn it into a series at that point. But since they were worried about being pigeonholed, they kind of aired it at like weird times, and so they had like the first season was only five episodes, second season was like 8, I believe, but they aired them at really weird times. Like they aired them as like special events, or they put them in different time slots, or whenever they had a break in another show, or something along those lines. So it was a very kind of weird broadcast thing, and a few of the episodes were packaged together as movies. So there was this one. There's also Spider-Man Strikes Back, which was the 2-part Deadly Dust which are the first 2 episodes, I think, of the first season, and then the Dragons Challenge, which I think was the last 2 episodes of the second season, and then the series ended as a whole. Now I remember watching this as a kid. I think either this or Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends was actually my first introduction to Spider-Man as a character. And I remember, the big belt he was wearing, and like the web shooters around, the visible web shooters and all that kind of stuff. And the kendo fight scene, I remember that. So I had memories of this as a kid, and I'd watch this like whenever it came online and came on the air in syndication or something. I would sit there and I'd watch it, and I loved it as a kid. And even when I was rewatching it last night, some of the stuff stood out very clearly in my memory, like the kendo fight scene, like him making friends with them at the end of it, or like when Peter gets bit by the spider. I had a very clear memory of that. So. And him like getting ready to jump off the Empire State Building, that was also another memory that kind of stood out really clear in my head. So yeah, this was tickling my nostalgia bones in some interesting ways. How about you? What was your history with this show? So when I was a kid, I grew up in a town of 7,000. And because it was this long ago, it could support actually 3 separate places where you could rent movies, and none of them were a Blockbuster, right? But at the grocery store, you could check out movies, and they had these
these like I don't know if it was actually just like 2 episodes or if it was like those things that were packaged into movies, but they were on VHS, and I saw that at the grocery store. Like, holy crap! There's a Spider-Man movie, right? I have to. How did this one pass me by? So I would pick that up and I'd watch those and be a little disappointed. And they were on the Sci-Fi Channel too, back when that was when Sci-Fi Channel used to show just like whatever they could get their hands on at any time of day. But I did watch them, and like repeatedly. It wasn't like I watched them and was like, oh, like this isn't the same thing as the comics, I'm not going to check that out, because, and this is another thing that, it's hard for maybe younger generations to figure out, but like we didn't have options for Spider-Man in live action, right? It's like, unless you're watching the Electric Company or the Japanese Spider-Man TV show, which we did not have over here unless you bootlegged it or something, this was it, right? So it's like, if you wanted to see Spider-Man, like, quote unquote, in real life, you had to watch this. And so I did over and over again. Yeah, it's not something that we're like, I didn't love it as a kid, but I thought it was, I was like, excited about it. The stunts are cool. I still think, even like, in today's CG market, like that's a real guy, like swinging from a rope, right, from building to building. And that's impressive. But yeah, I was just so desperate to see Spider-Man, in any form that I could, that I'm like, yeah, I'll check this out. And you know what? I still think the way that, I would think that Spider-Man would look, again, quote unquote, in real life, is that suit. Imperfect though it may be.
Yeah, I must have watched this multiple times, because that's the only reason I can explain why some of this stuff stands out so clearly in my memory. And yeah, it is kind of wild when we think back of all the options we have now and how desperate we were for stuff back then. I mean, I recorded the Generation X and Nick Fury TV films on VHS off the network, and I watched them multiple times. And I maintain that Nick Fury's actually got some good things about it. Generation X, not so much, but we've talked about both of those before. But this one is the first time I went back to it. I've always had a curiosity about this ever since I first watched it as a kid. As I got older and as I got more into this kind of stuff, I'm always just kind of like, I wonder what it was like. Like I always had meant to like kind of go back to this and go back and revisit it. And so this is the first time I've watched it since I was a kid. And well, before we get too much into the movie itself, you actually found out some interesting connections in your area about this, and so you actually were able to do some research about it. So why don't you tell people a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is pretty wild. So when we exchanged emails and stuff, and talking about this was a film that you hadn't done on your podcast yet. Even if there was more things available, like if the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans were available, I would have picked this because it's a little obsession of mine. But I was doing my sort of basic research. I was just going to like go on, Wikipedia or IMDb and check out like, have the people involved done anything else? What else have they done? I discovered that Alvin Boritz, who wrote the teleplay for this movie pilot, whatever it is, his papers are actually in the possession of the, let me make sure I have the name right here, the Wisconsin Center for Film and Theater Research, which is adjacent to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And that's where I went to college, and I still live in the Madison, Wisconsin area. So I was like, wow, can I do they have the Spider-Man scripts and stuff? And I, emailed them and I put in a request, and they did. And I could went there the other week and checked them out. So yeah, I've actually seen like earlier drafts, and I will say that for anybody who's familiar with this version of the movie, that like there's a version of this that's a little more faithful to the Spider-Man thing as we know it from the comics. I wish there were notes from like the studio, because it seems like this was the sort of thing that like you write a version and you send it to the studio or the producer, and the producer's like, I need 8 things changed just arbitrarily. But yeah, I saw some different versions of the script. I saw some handwritten notes, which I could not decipher because he had a crazy handwriting style that I just could not decipher except for bits and pieces. I saw some stationery from Stan Lee and a typed thing from Stan Lee, but not signed, unfortunately. But yeah, they just let any old person come in and check this stuff out, even if you're not an academic, which I am not.
So, what was kind of like the more faithful version of the script? Like, what was some stuff in the original script that was a little bit more faithful to the comic?
Yeah, so like the most surprising thing about this movie, like if you watch it, today out of the blue, is that there is no Uncle Ben, right? There's no motivating tragedy of any kind. Like Aunt May is there, but she's just sort of like the sweet old lady who lives with him. The closest thing that he has to a motivation in this movie is that he needs $46 to pay for a COD on some transistors or something. So he's trying to hit up the newspaper for it. There is an earlier version of this where it starts out with that same like the bank robbery, and then it goes to the police station, and Peter's there to pick up his Aunt May, who apparently was wandering over to the great cemetery where Ben is buried and got lost along the way, and she just seems a little confused and stuff. But there's this whole like runner throughout the thing of like, I have this he was angsty in the original. Like there was there's none of that in the actual movie as it exists, right? But yeah.
And apparently, whenever Aunt May appeared on this show, every time she appeared, she was played by a different actress.
Yeah, and you would never know because she's like not a character, right?
Yeah,
in the traditional sense. But yeah, there's actually a scene in here in that original version where he tries to confess in the way that the later Spider-Man 2 movie would have, and but she sort of falls asleep, I guess, because she's sort of dottery in this sort of a comedy old person, so to speak, as in television language. But and at one point he's referred to as Uncle Dan, and I don't know if that was a typo or if that was just a David Banner, Bruce Banner kind of thing. But yeah, I mean there was and like this whole the plot of this movie, right, involves this sort of like self-help seminar. It's the 70s, right? So it's that sort of like self-help EST kind of thing, and he's like, you're looking for answers in your life, but like you're not finding them. And in the original version of the script, Peter is actually sort of taken in by this guy a bit because he's like, oh, like I have a lot of angst. I wish I was a normal person. I have this guilt about my uncle, right? And so he's actually like more receptive to it. Whereas in the version of this movie that actually exists, he is like, oh, I see through this guy. He's just mean to be mean so that he can sell you his whatever he's selling you.
Yeah, and it was funny when I was rewatching this last night. A few things stuck. Like actually, for the first like maybe 15 or 20 minutes or so, I was actually kind of dialed into it. I thought Nick Hammond was doing a pretty decent job as Peter Parker. I thought they did a pretty good job of the whole like Parker Luck thing. Like he gets his camera broken. He doesn't have the money to pay for the COD and everything like that. But it is just kind of wild that his entire motivation for this is this $46 so he can pay the COD fee, and he never gets it.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed Nicholas Hammond because like I still have a lot of fondness for the way that he plays Peter Parker because he doesn't, he's supposed to be a graduate student, so he's a little older than the traditional, high school, early college Spider-Man. But he sort of plays him almost like he's like a bright 12-year-old because he's just so enthusiastic and earnest and stuff. He's like Clark Kent for real, right? And so I enjoyed that.
I don't know if it was the visual thing, like his look or what, but I felt like there's some link between Nicholas Hammond's version of Peter Parker and the one from like the 90s Spider-Man animated series.
Yeah, I saw that a lot, actually, revisiting this.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me because I've been like kind of dipping into that lately with my son. He loves Spider-Man, so I've been trying to like introduce him to more Spider-Man things. But and so for the first portion of it, I'm pretty dialed into it. I thought it was interesting they brought in because I had no memory of Robbie Robertson being in this, so I thought it was pretty cool we had him in there. I did know that Jonah was in it, although Jonah is very toned down, which is it's so weird because they have this police captain, Captain Barbera, who's based on Captain Stacy apparently, but they call him they give him a different name. I don't know why. That seemed like a missed opportunity there. And Barbera is basically Jonah.
Yeah,
he's even got a cigar and everything.
He's got a cigar. He kind of looks at the way that John Romita Sr. would draw Jonah, right, in the Silver Age. So like, it's really staggering to me, like why they needed two Jonahs, and like the actual Jonah is not very intense. I don't know if it's just because like they thought if it's a crime show, somebody who's actually like at the scene of the crime might be more interesting to spark off of him. But I mean, Jonah barely cares about Spider-Man other than like, that's weird. Right. Yeah. And again in the original version of the script, and I wish I could have spent more time with it, because like I could do I could actually probably become the world's greatest living expert on the production of this the screenplay here. But in the early version, he is actually like he is doing the like Spider-Man's probably behind this. Spider-Man's probably in league with the criminals, and that sort of thing. So they did mean to do at some point like something a little closer to the comics and stuff. And there is a treatment in there that actually is like, here is the origin of Spider-Man, and it is basically a summary of Amazing Spider-Man 15 from this screenwriter. So like it's not. I'd always watch this and wondered, like, did they just not know anything about Spider-Man, and we're just like, okay, it's a guy in a costume. He gets like, they got like a one-line summary or something from Stan Lee or whatever, and wrote it based on that. But like, no, they actually, he seemed to know the basic stuff. He wanted to put, and like that Parker Luck stuff, there's even more of that in the original one too, where like when he tries out his costume and he sort of like flexes, there's like a tear in the costume, right? So there's got that. There's more when he's got this sort of runner throughout the movie where he's like sneezing, because he gets a cold because he's Spider-Man, right? He's a hard luck hero, but he actually has to like go into a drugstore and like refill his allergy medication in costume and do that. So and like be humiliated, right? So like there is a little bit more of that, like, Spider-Man classic feel. And he jokes in the original version, which in the final version he's pretty silent unless he's actively hitting somebody up for information, right?
You know what? I remember in Amazing Spider-Man 2, there was that scene where Andrew Garfield goes into the drugstore as Spider-Man, and he's wearing his coat because he's sick. I think it was amazing. I'm pretty sure it was Amazing Spider-Man 2. So I wonder now if they got that from that original screenplay.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things in here that I don't know if it's just like they are natural things to want to put in a Spider-Man movie or what, but the confession scene from the original version shows up in Spider-Man 2 when Peter Parker, he gets the spider bite and then he sort of goes to bed and he sort of like has these like spidery visions in his head. That's in the movie. So I do think that there is maybe some kind of pipeline potentially between this and the movies or whatever. If for no other reason than like, well, it has been done before, so we have a proof of concept. We can point to something. But I don't know.
But yeah, as far as the casting goes, like I really think if they had just switched Michael Pataki, who plays Captain Barbera, and David White, who plays Jonah, I think it would have worked so much better.
Yeah, it's really staggering to see that like you have Jonah and another Jonah, and like why isn't the guy who's Jonah, right?
Yeah, the only thing Michael Pataki is missing is the Hitler stash. That's it. That he'd be Jonah.
Yeah, and he does some great cigar work in this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, another thing I thought of is like he's basically Jack Kirby too.
Yeah. He's the MVP of the whole thing for me and Michael Pataki.
He is. He's got some great lines, and it's never. He like just manages to toe the line of where it gets to be almost comedic, and for some reason he comes right up to that line, but he doesn't cross it. I thought he did a pretty good job with that. And then we also have Hilly Hicks as Robbie, which is interesting because he's very young, much younger than we are used to seeing Robbie here. And I almost felt like, when he's calling like Peter a kid and everything like that, I'm like, you guys look like you're the same age.
Right. Yeah, Nicholas Hammond is no spring chicken himself. Even like in the logic of the movie, he's supposed to be a grad student. But yeah. Robbie looks like he's late 20s, early 30s or something.
But also another connection to the Spider-Man movies too. In Spider-Man 2, right? Tobey Maguire's Peter, he's trying to sell Jonah on these like artsy, life of New York style features things, which is exactly what Nicholas Hammond keeps bringing to Jonah at the beginning of it. And Jonah's like, get these pictures out of here. I don't want any of this. This is even before the Spider-Man stuff.
Yeah. What's really funny about the Peter and Jonah dynamic in this movie is that traditionally you're supposed to think that Jonah is being unreasonable to Peter Parker, but actually in this movie, I thought that because Jonah's so toned down and because Peter is so earnest and his excuses are pretty lame, I was like, yeah, actually, you know what? I think I'm on Jonah's side in most of these disputes, because I'm like, yeah, you know what? This kid is kind of annoying. I used to work at a newspaper, right? If we had this kid come in and be like, yeah, I took pictures of like people playing chess at the park, I could see that very much being like, why am I even talking? I'm the publisher of this newspaper. Why am I even talking to you, this freelancer?
Yeah, it almost feels like it's an interesting dynamic because you almost never see a situation where Peter has an actual interest of photography before he becomes Spider-Man. And you get a little bit of it in the Tobey Maguire movie because he's taking pictures for the school paper, but that, a lot of people worked on the school paper. Didn't mean they had interest in journalism necessarily. But here he seems to have a very keen interest in photojournalism. It's not something that he kind of falls into just as a matter of convenience. I thought that was an interesting twist on the mythos of the character.
Yeah, and there's a line in there where Jonah says, "Oh, I know that you're trying to work at this paper to put your way through college, and that's what I did." I thought that was a nice sort of humanizing thing there. I mean, there's definitely some attempts in this movie to establish some kind of connection, right, between characters, but I do think in a lot of cases it has been sort of tamped down by revisions or notes or just somebody going, I think that we need less talking and more action or something, but there's not a lot of action, so I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, I think what if I was going to take a guess, I would think that maybe because they wanted some character to be more of a sympathetic type of older
like
mentor type.
Almost,
yeah, exactly, And so they had the choice between either Jonah or Barbera, and they wanted Barbera to be more of the antagonistic type because that way he can be, kind of like he can, because that makes more sense with him being the police captain and everything, and him giving Peter trouble whenever he comes up to look at these crime scenes and all that kind of stuff. So in that way, it made sense to put Jonah in that role. Also, like in more modern incarnations, you do see this idea where Jonah's, he is very gruff, but he does legitimately care for Peter. He just has difficulty showing it. Right. And I guess at that time, they probably felt like the audience wouldn't be able to clue into that if you made Jonah too overbearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
We're going to take a quick break, though, and then we'll come back and we'll talk more about this. Ever have a situation where you want to watch something on Netflix, but it's only available in another country? Or are you nervous about using public Wi-Fi networks without any protection? Then what you need is a VPN, or virtual private network. A VPN is essentially your own superhero mask that protects your device's secret identity from prying eyes. In these uncertain times, protecting yourself on the internet is more important than ever to prevent your data from being sold to the highest bidder. But free VPNs don't offer the security they promise, so a subscription VPN is best. I've been a loyal user of ExpressVPN for years. It's got fast speed, great support, and is very easy to use. Just install ExpressVPN on your device or Wi-Fi router, click a button, and you've got instant protection. You can also select which country you want to browse from, which gets around geo-blocking on streaming services like Netflix and Disney+. If you'd like to try out ExpressVPN, you can get a free trial by clicking the link in the show notes. So what are you waiting for? Start protecting yourself today. Since you're listening to this show, I already know you love watching superhero movies and TV shows, and you just might enjoy superhero comics. But how about superhero novels? I'm giving away 2 free superhero novels and 1 free superhero short story. Visit percivalconstantine.com/SCP to get access to Vanguard, Heroes Forged, the first novel in my own Avengers and X-Men inspired superhero novel series, and Ronin Born, my cyberpunk superhero novel set in a futuristic Japan. I'm also throwing in Fire and Lightning, a free prequel story to my new Power Rangers inspired superhero series Omega Knights. So visit percivalconstantine.com/SCP, those are just the letters SCP, to get started, or click on the link in the show notes. And now on with the show. And we are back. So one of the interesting, it's kind of funny watching this because it's funny when I'm thinking about this and comparing to some of the other stuff that was happening at the time, like the Incredible Hulk. Whereas the Incredible Hulk, I felt like the human drama stuff was a little bit too long, and when we got and the actual Hulk stuff was too limited. So when I was revisiting that one, and for the time, the Hulk stuff was very well done. Now here I had the opposite idea, where the human drama stuff I thought was pretty good, but then once we get into the Spider-Man stuff, and we bring in and Peter becomes Spider-Man, that's when this actually became more boring for me.
Yeah. It's funny how that works, right? Because I remember when I rewatched this, and I rewatched this before, a couple of years ago when it was on YouTube or whatever, and thinking like, oh, maybe it was, maybe the reason I didn't respond to this as much as I could have as a kid is because it was, less actiony, so it's more adult, maybe it's more crime oriented, maybe I will get it now, and it's like, no, actually, this isn't like an adult show made for adults. It is pretty. Everything is pitched at, I think, a 12-year-old or so, which, not unfair to do for a Spider-Man show, but it is funny because I had this perception when I was younger of like, oh, this is sort of like a grown-ups version of Spider-Man, and not so much.
No, it's really not. Like, honestly, the even maybe I haven't watched much of it, but I'd imagine like even the 80s Spider-Man cartoon may have been more adult than this is. I mean, definitely the 90s show was. And it's because have you ever seen like the 1977 Doctor Strange TV film?
I think I saw that on Sci-Fi Channel once, in the 90s or something, right? But yeah,
surprisingly
I don't
adult.
that.
Surprisingly
Really?
Mature. Yeah, surprisingly mature. Like the effects are dog shit, but it's the story itself, the acting, surprisingly mature for what it was. And like I could have seen that if it had gone to series, like becoming like, kind of like a, I don't know, like a Kolchak type thing or something along those lines.
Sure. Yeah, nobody in this movie really has a character, right, that you want to sort of come back to in a compelling way, because like as much as I like Nicholas Hammond, he is just sort of like chipper and eager to please and very, very earnest and stuff. There's no like real sense of like I want to spend time with these characters because I think they're interesting or even funny, right? Like even like on like the A-Team, like it's not even like A-Team level of like, oh, I enjoy hanging around these characters, right? It's just sort of like everybody is sort of there to push their little bit of the plot forward.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems is that they don't give Peter any motivation. Like,
right.
Like you said, there's no Uncle Ben here, so there's none of that stuff. And it's the easiest thing to do with the kind of budget you're working with, and they don't even do that. So Peter becomes Spider-Man. He gets he's practicing crawling on the walls and everything like that, and then he sees this purse snatcher, and he shouts out to him, and then the guy gets so surprised that it gives a cop a chance to come and get him, and all these other people are like, yeah, we saw him too, and then he goes to the Daily Bugle to try and sell some more pictures, and they're talking about this Spider-Man people are seeing, and Peter's like, oh, well, I've got a picture of him. And that's when he decides to make the costume and pose for these pictures. And I will give him this, like, unlike the Amazing Spider-Man movies or the Raimi Spider-Man films, this costume actually does look like something that a broke college student would be able to make.
Yeah, that's again, like I really feel like when I watch this, I'm like, yeah, that's what Spider-Man looks like, right? If I was a person in the Marvel universe, and those especially when you see him like far away, like crawling up the building, it's like, yeah, that's what it would look like if I was Phil Sheldon or somebody, living in that world.
Yeah, so that part they did get right. It does look like something a college student would make. And the funny thing is when he's this whole conversation with him and Jonah and Robbie about Spider-Man, and it's almost like it feels like the kind of conversation you would see in a parody of a Spider-Man movie.
Right. Yeah, because he has no craftiness about like covering up his connection to Spider-Man or whatever. He's like, yeah, I've got a picture, and you want to know things about him? I have a keen insight into his personality and why he would wear a costume and all that stuff, right? So yeah, he's not selling the secret identity very well.
No, and also there's this weird, like, almost who's on first quality to that conversation, right? Jonah's like, he's like, well, how many legs does he have? He's like, well, he has 2. But you said he was a spider. No, he's a Spider-Man. And this comes up several times.
Yeah, it's very cute, right? I think it is what they're going for with that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I wish it was a little funnier, Yeah, because I think there's definitely some good angles for comedy, and I'm not sure when Nicholas Hammond is being quite so, chipper and earnest and stuff. I wonder if he is playing that up, or if that's just like the note that he was given is like, Peter Parker's a nice kid. Go, right? Read the lines, but.
And also the fact that we don't get any sort of quippy stuff from him as Spider-Man, I think also kind of detracts from it, because, it'd be one thing if he was, actually going out there and giving some sort of personality to Spider-Man, but the only ever times he does, like, he questions people, and then he makes friends with these kendo guys after their brainwashing wears off, and that's it.
Yeah, and again, in that early version of the script or whatever, there are, like, when he's fighting the kendo guys, he's making jokes. I mean, they're not. I don't know that they're like the most brilliant Spider-Man, jokes that you've ever heard or whatever. But it is like, making jokes about nice sword and all that kind of stuff, right? And so, like, I wonder if they just thought that was silly, or if they thought it wouldn't be, because I mean, it is sort of the funny thing in, like, all superhero movies where, like, why does nobody, like, make jokes while they're fighting and stuff? And so, well, because you can't breathe and punch people and be like, here's my entire motivation in a paragraph while I jump into the air and punch you, right?
And let's talk about the action, or what there is of it.
Yeah.
The weird thing is, like, the way that also, I don't know, because it wasn't Hammond in the suit. It was a stuntman who was in the suit, and then Hammond was doing voiceovers whenever in the rare instance when he did speak. But he's always, like, hunched over, which I thought was very kind of a weird choice. Like,
yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, I like the idea that he has a sort of unusual, sort of creepy body language. I mean, I do remember when I showed the video to my son when he was 3. And just, like, a bit of like, hey, look, it's Spider-Man in real life. And he, like, it freaked him out because he's got those big circular eyes, and he's, like, hunched over and he's kind of creeping around. Like, he is creepy. And I do like that, actually, about this version of Spider-Man.
So here's where we differ. I didn't like that aspect of it. It just felt very... It felt very awkward to me. Like, you compare it to, say, like, the Japanese Spider-Man, where he also had those kind of, like, creepy movements, but it felt a lot more natural.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it felt very forced. It felt like the studio's like, okay, you got to hunch over, you got to crawl.
I wonder if some of that is just, like, if the costume is not fitting very well, and he just sort of has to, he's, like, sort of crunched up in the spandex or something. Because there's a part where he's, like, sort of running on the street, and he's sort of, like, hobbling almost, like he hurt himself. So I wonder if that just, like, we had 2 versions of the suit, and they were all uncomfortable, and I had no real range of motion in them.
There actually is a Spider-Man 77 fan site. So, and I think they may have, they've got some interviews on there. So there may be one with the stunt guy on that. So, but yeah, those movements, and also the wall crawling effects, I feel like they were really enamored of the wall crawling segments because they use them a lot in the show.
Yeah, it is funny because I think that the wall crawling thing is actually sort of downplayed in most versions of the movies and comics and stuff, just because, like, the web stuff is so much more visually exciting. And they were like, no, like, the wall crawling thing is cool. And I think there are some shots where it looks good, and I actually do like the So that stuntman, he invented this kind of camera that like was like head mounted, like those helmets that have like the beer in them, and they have the straws, you can drink out of them. It's sort of like that, but with a camera. And so some of the times when he's on the wall, he's actually like taking footage of himself crawling up the wall, and it's like, hey, I'm Spider-Man, right? This is what it would look like to be Spider-Man on that wall. So that's kind of neat. But there's other times where he's sort of floating. Yeah,
there some of the first person shots, they were pretty well done. But then we got stuff, like when he's at Aunt May's house and he's wall crawling all over it. And it's just literally Nicholas Hammond crawling over a projector screen.
Yeah, it's really. I watched this with my son, because now he's older now. He doesn't cry at the sight of Spider-Man, and he's just crawling on a large photo or a green screen it's probably just rear projection or something of the house, and not even really pretending to be like, oh, I'm crawling around the space of it, just from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. He's going.
And even when they do it too, when he's crawling up on the building too, at one point, like he's crawling up in the building as Spider-Man, and like there's like a ledge part of the building, it's like jutting out, and he just still crawls over it as it's a completely flat surface, and you don't see any shadow. His body casts no shadow on the building at all.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly appreciate like the lack of resources and money and stuff at the time. I mean, I don't have a better idea of how to shoot that in 1977 or anything, certainly. But yeah, it is very comical. And even when I was a kid watching it, I was like, yeah, this doesn't really capture the stuff that I want out of the Spider-Man experience.
There's also another part too where he he's crawling around and oh crap, I completely lost my train of thought of it. It was I'll think of it later, but anyway, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm segue to something else while I try and think of what I was going to say. It's funny you mentioned that you first showed this to your son when he was 3. My son is just a few weeks shy of his 3rd birthday, and so I started watching this last night, and I'm like, look, it's Spider-Man, and he was watched it for like maybe 5 minutes, and then he got bored.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, and this is the same thing with the show, is that like it is boring. The most unfortunate thing is that there's just not a whole lot of snap to it to really keep you engaged. And again, I thought that when I got older, I would appreciate that more or something, but no, it's actually just not a very, the action is not, everything is subpar in this, right? And I get the feeling that this was, and I guess I want to give the writer the benefit of the doubt because I've seen his papers, right? So I feel some very estranged connection to this man who, was working in the 70s. But I feel like this is and like Stan Lee, right, famously clashed with the producer about this and said that he was not faithful enough or too juvenile. It does feel like the writer in that first version had a lot of ideas that were, oh, this could be interesting and this could be, add some complexity and some shades or whatever. And that somebody went, no, this is a show for kids, right? This is, make it less, because I mean, like the grief about Uncle Ben was like a real thing in the, that some early version of it, and that gets totally lifted out just because why make, if a child is watching this, why make the child sad? Right. I guess is the thought there, but it means that you have no interesting connection to this photographer, and he just sort of dresses up because he's nice, right? And he wants to help people, and he wants $46 for his COD.
No, that's really it's funny. It almost sounds like you're making a joke, but you're not. That is literally his motivation. Yeah. he's just a nice guy who wants $46. That's it. I remember what I was going to say before about the wall crawling. There's this one scene where like the stuntman is crawling up the wall, and it's the film from like the bottom, so it's like looking up at him, and he's like doing this weird thing where he's like he's like almost like full arm length away from the wall. He's not like crawling up close, but he's like almost like standing like with his arms and legs like almost fully extended, and he looks down from between his legs, and then they repeat that, but they just flip it out.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. Like, I feel like they were just. I feel like that someone's just like, man, these wall crawling effects are so amazing. We got to use as many of them as we can.
Yeah. I mean, they really were pretty sure that kids were going to love the wall crawling, and I don't know that they did.
Well, honestly, I'm not sure, because this show actually got pretty good ratings.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's. I mean, yeah. I'm actually selling it short because this did get. There's an assumption, right, with people that say that, like, oh, this is crappy or whatever, so it got canceled because it was bad. My understanding is like you were saying, like, it got good ratings whenever they did show it at irregular times. It was just that it was like a younger demo than they wanted, and it was.
It was also really expensive to make too. That was the other thing.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it had the younger demo, and it was too expensive to make, and they obviously the network was kind of biased against it to begin with because they didn't want to become known as the superhero network. So they were always like showing it at weird times. But even despite like them trying to kneecap this thing almost every chance, it still got really good ratings every time it came on. So it was I mean, it's kind of a weird success story in a way in that aspect of it.
Yeah, and and people do love this thing, right? I mean, I've said some not entirely nice things about it, but I am quite fond of this. When I watch it, gives me like a nice little nostalgia fuzzy for everything. Yeah, I just think it was a lot of the decisions in here seem like I'm a television producer and I'm looking at this and like, oh, this is a kid's thing. Dumb it down, make it as not as complex, as simple as you can. Make it straightforward, and that'll be good enough. And so I can see why Stan Lee was so upset for like the Spider-Man sort of the crown jewel, right, of the whole Marvel relatable hero thing to be just he's a nice kid who's sometimes annoys Jonah Jameson.
And the funny thing about Stan Lee as well is that this show was famously one of the few Marvel properties that he badmouthed, because he almost never did that. He was almost always praising every single Marvel property, that adaptation that came out, except for this one. This is like one of the few where he said like, no, that actually wasn't that good. It was pretty juvenile and everything. But the funny thing is, though, you compare it to the toy version, the Japanese one, which changed everything about the character except for the costume and the fact that he has spider powers. And even the costume, they made some small alterations too, like with the spider buckler and all that. But it was... I mean, Stanley loved that show. He thought that was he especially loved like the stunt work and the way that the actor moved in the suit and everything like that. And I'm not sure how much of the Japanese one you've seen, but I've seen a few episodes here and there.
I've seen a couple of them,
Yeah, and it's Shinji Toto plays him in there, and it's fun. It's really fun. Like one thing you can't say about that show is it's boring, which is the curse of the 77 one. I mean, they had probably similar budgets, but in the toy one, they swung for the fences. They tried to squeeze like every yen out of that thing they could get. But this one, it just feels like I kind of wonder where the budget went to with it.
Right. Well, I hear that. So there's one scene where he uses his web to swing from like one building to the next, right? And I heard that was I read that was like a 2-day setup or something, just because that's really like a man, right, on wires, swinging from a rope from building to building. And they shot that from every angle apparently, so they could reuse it in future episodes or whatever. So like, I mean, there was real danger involved there. And there's I think it's in the Deadly Dust episodes where he's like hanging from a helicopter. And that's like a legitimately cool and and expensive stunt, I'm sure, to get that right. But yeah, it does seem like maybe all the money went to that those brainwashing computers. all the dials and diodes, because I love that stuff, right? I love the 70s conception of like what the high tech computer panel looks like, right?
Also, the web nets. I liked how you have this close up of his hand, and it just like it swoops up and then falls down.
Yeah, and it doesn't really seem to catch them or anything, because it goes on them, and then like in the next scene they're free. So I guess it was just the surprise of seeing a web come out of somebody's hand and being like, "Geez."
I guess so. Yeah.
Is this dangerous? No. I guess we're fine.
But something else that struck me as weird, and I'm not sure if this was popped up in the notes or anything, but the belt he starts wearing, because Up until the last scene, he's not wearing the belt or anything like that. And it's funny, we see him make the web shooters, and the web shooters are ridiculously bulky. And then he covers, somehow he gets those under his gloves, I guess. But then all of a sudden, in the last scene, after the Empire, after the maybe it's the Empire State Building or the Christ, I don't know, whatever. After he almost tries to jump off the building and he gets the mind control pin knocked off, then he changes to Spider-Man and he goes to confront the extortionist, and now he's wearing the web cartridge belt, and it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and that was one of the things that like really irked me. You know, when I saw this for the first time, like, oh, you have a really good like faithful Spider-Man costume, and you put a belt on that, and like I understand putting a bracelet thing on his wrist or whatever to denote the web shooter, and maybe it makes it easier to hide some special effect or whatever. I guess maybe the belt was there. Maybe you could like attach wires to the belt or something to hold him up when he's crawling around or something. But yeah, I don't know why he doesn't have it from the beginning then.
Yeah, it's weird, and that became the look, like, because then in the series he's wearing the belt and the web shooters throughout the entire series. Yeah, and the web shooters I understand, right? The web shooters make sense. The belt just looks weird though.
Right. He doesn't really seem to use much with the belt. Like I don't know if maybe in later episodes that I haven't revisited lately, if he has like the camera attached to it or whatever. I don't think he has the spider signal light or anything, but. Yeah, maybe it is just a practical thing of like we can attach some cables to here. You
know what? Yeah, maybe that might be it. Maybe it's just a way to make it easier for some of the effects and stuff like that. Although it's kind of interesting because this kind of influenced Ben Reilly's two different looks in the comics, because in the Scarlet Spider, he's got the belt and the over the gloves web shooters, and then when he becomes Spider-Man, he doesn't have the belt anymore, but he still has the web shooters.
Yeah, that was my actually I remember seeing Scarlet Spider for the first time and being like, oh, like the Spider-Man TV show. I get it.
And it was funny, as a kid, I actually thought it was cool that they had the web shooters and the belt over it, because I thought it made, like, me as a kid, I thought it made sense for Spider-Man to have a utility belt. And
oh yeah, and it looks, and you know, it's an interesting way to sort of break up the skin tight silhouette or whatever.
Yeah, but looking at it now, it definitely doesn't work that well on it. No. Now, it's so funny, though. We almost got like a fully realized Marvel Universe on TV in the late 70s, because you had this. You had Incredible Hulk, you had Doctor Strange, you had Daredevil and Thor, who appeared on Incredible Hulk. You had, and then you also had the Captain America TV films too, the Captain America and Captain America: Death Too Soon. So I almost kind of wonder, like, part of me is almost wondering, like, if anybody has tried pitching Marvel like an Infinity comic or something focused on like the Marvel 77 or something like that. It might be interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know that it's what the thing that's really crazy to me is that we've had 3 movies now about different versions of Spider-Man from across the multiverse and different, media incarnations and stuff. And sorry about that. That was a cat. But we've had so many versions of this idea of like we can bring all of them, different cartoons and comic versions into the same multiverse or whatever. And Nicholas Hammond doesn't get to show up in any of them. And from what I've read, he's up for it.
He did appear in the Unity scene in Spider-Man, the Raimi Spider movie. He was in that. He was in the crowd in that. And he was supposed to have a cameo as a cab driver in No Way Home, but it ended up being cut before they started filming it just for time. And it's funny because, we were talking about the Japanese Spider-Man. He's shown up in the comics. Like, I just saw some art the other day of like him. He's even getting like his own unique Spider-Man suit for some for like an upcoming crossover.
Wow.
I think he was also I'm pretty sure he was also in the recent Spider-Verse movie too, at least at one point in it. But
maybe.
Yeah, Nicholas Hammond though, they did give him a Marvel Legends figure though, so there is that, or it's coming out soon or something like that.
Yeah, I saw that in researching for this. I kind of want to get it.
I kind of do too. It looks pretty cool actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not much of an action figure guy actually, but like I tend to like the ones that are a little left of center. Like I have a yellow suit Daredevil. You know, I have a kind of one of the alternate Iron Mans or whatever. So I kind of like the weird alternate, left of center kind of pick for those. So I might have to look into if that's available and make my like once every 5 years action figure purchase.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd rather have the Toei version instead, but which they do have with him too. So, but yeah, but this was it was interesting to revisit this basically, and it was I wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't sure if I was going to think it was just terribly, completely awful, or or if it's actually got like some really interesting charm to it, and it's kind of both, weirdly enough. Yeah, that's exactly it. Is that it's hard to say this is trash, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that's very endearing about it. There's stuff that I still find sort of funny, even if it's just laughing along with it. But yeah, it's not. This is the thing that I think I'll probably watch again, right? Sometime when I'm feeling nostalgic or something. But it's definitely not like a hidden gem that I think that people need to go out and see if they've never experienced it before. Mm-hmm. And also interesting, when they did go to series, Jameson was recast. So Robert F. Simon played him in the series. Hilly Hicks did not come back as Robbie. Instead, they brought in Chip Fields to play Rita Conway, who was Jonah's secretary. And she was basically Glory Grant. And they also had Captain Barbera came back, at least in the first season, but he was gone in the second season. The second season, they replaced him with Julie Masters, played by Ellen Bry, who was a reporter, and sort of a love interest, which one of the weird things of this, I get I understand why they couldn't use like Dr. Octopus, the Green Goblin or anything like that. But it's weird that they didn't even lean on Peter's human supporting cast in the comics. Like they didn't have like Gwen Stacy, Captain Stacy, no Mary Jane, none of that kind of stuff. No Harry, no Flash, none of them. And it feels like, because one of the things I've always said is that I think Spider-Man would actually work much better in a TV setting than in a movie setting, because you'd be able to get
100%.
Be able to get in all the character dynamics and stuff that really makes the Spider-Man comics really interesting. I mean, the movies are great, but you do miss some of those. You have to kind of like rush through some of the character stuff because you just don't have the time to explore it as you would have in a TV show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I've always thought that the natural medium for a Spider-Man show would be, or a Spider-Man adaptation would be a TV show, right? And I think because you have that soap opera aspect, you have that. Spider-Man comics are less about like the story that's important and more about the business of being Peter Parker and going off and catching up with subplots and all that stuff. So yeah, I've always thought a TV show makes all the sense in the world. I guess you just weren't there yet.
Right. Well, the weird thing is though, like you don't even use all the human elements from the comics that would work very well in a TV show, like the interpersonal drama, the love triangle with MJ and Harry, or with MJ and Gwen, or any of that stuff. Like none of that stuff is used here at all. The whole, Captain Stacy Peter relationship, none of that. And yeah, it would have been so much more interesting if they could have done that. And they also could have brought in some more grounded villains, like, the Enforcers, or probably not Kingpin, because I think that was probably, tied up in something with Daredevil or whatever the case was. But yeah, like you could have used like the Enforcers, you could have used like the Tinkerer, or you could have found ways to, find different ways. Like, for example, I mean, even with this plot line about the Guru and all that, I mean, you could have done that as a version of Dr. Octopus, and this kind of idea, like these people that he mind controls are like his tentacles, quote unquote, or something like that.
Yeah, he could be Brainwasher. He could be, you could even say Mysterio just because he's mysterious, right? I mean, it wouldn't.
Oh yeah,
it's like that. The 90s the 1990 Flash TV show, right? They had they had Mirror Master, and it was just a guy who used holograms or whatever, but it's still like you would still make the connection as the comics fan, right? Of like what was going on there. You could have done like any of that stuff. But for some reason, it was almost surprising to me that Robbie shows up, because the sort of MO with the rest of this movie and with the rest of that show is take a character and just make up a new one that's entirely different, but it has a different name. Yeah.
And that was kind of the MO for all of these shows back then, too, because it was the same thing with the Incredible Hulk, right? You didn't have any characters from the comics other than Banner, I don't think. There was no Thunderbolt Ross, I think. There was no Betty Brant, none of that. So, and I think Wonder Woman was kind of the same way, too. I think you had Steve Trevor, but that was it. Doctor Strange, they had Wong in there, and they technically had Morgan Le Fay, but it wasn't necessarily the comics version, right? It was more the Arthurian legend version. So even that, not so much.
Yeah, I really do think that there was, again, unfathomable now that superhero movies are such big business, but back in the day, it was disreputable, to be doing the superhero thing. And I feel like a lot of, television producers change stuff just for the fact of I have to change this because I'm an important television producer. I need to have some sort of input on this, because otherwise, if it was good in the first place, it would be a TV show or a movie, and not a comic book, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it was this idea that, okay, we can have a superhero, but if we have supervillains, that's taking us into Batman 66 territory. And even Adventures of Superman, the George Reeves show, there's no Lex Luthor on that or anything. So this was Batman 66 was kind of an outlier in the fact that they used actual villains in it.
Right.
So yeah, throwback to an interesting time, I guess we could say. But yeah, I think it would be cool to see if they could do I am wondering, now we're getting Secret Wars here. I mean, it'd be kind of cool to see Nick Hammond as an old retired Spider-Man or something like that.
When they were doing the Avengers, the chairs, with all the names and stuff, I was like, if you have Nicholas Hammond on there, right, I will wait in line for a ticket for this movie.
Well, I don't trust any of the rumors, but there is a rumor that there'll be some more Spider-Verse stuff in the upcoming Tom Holland movie. So maybe we can see Nicholas Hammond come in at some point in there. Maybe have him. I mean, he's age appropriate now. You could bring him in as Ezekiel Sims from the Straczynski run.
Oh wow, yeah, you could, right?
So that would work out really well too. Yeah. And he's a decent actor too, so I don't see any reason why you wouldn't do it. I mean, it's not like some of the other ones we've gotten from some of these older movies where you don't really want to see him come back again. I think it'd be interesting to see him try something else. Anyway, Justin, thanks so much for coming on. This was a fun discussion. Yeah, and it was interesting revisiting this. But why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, Iron Age of Comics. We are available, I think, wherever you get your podcasts. If there's any place where you can't find Iron Age of Comics, let me know, and I will figure out how to do that. But yeah, look for that. We have a Patreon. That's patreon.com/Iron Age of Comics. We have social media. We maintain things on different platforms, but Blue Sky is sort of where we're hanging out these days, mostly. That's at Iron Age of Comics. Pretty much just type in Iron Age of Comics podcasts anywhere, and you will find us. So
awesome. Well, we'll have links to some of that stuff in the show notes, so please check it out. Again, great show. Really love listening to it. And as for us, superherocinephiles.com is the website. Super Cinema Pod on Instagram and Twitter, or not Twitter. What I'm saying, we're not on Twitter anymore. Instagram and Threads. Although we just pretty much just post release announcements. Like you, we're also mostly just on Blue Sky, and that is superherocinephiles.com over there. And Justin's going to be coming back soon. We're going to be talking some comics as well. We're going to have you come on to talk about the Josh Whedon, John Cassaday Astonishing X-Men run in a few weeks. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
All right, that does it for this. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine. The show is created by myself and the late, great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate it if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.